For several winter nights, Clara Stahlbaum had the same dream. She finds herself within the labyrinthic halls of a darkened castle, and although she has no idea of how she got there, or of the paths that lie between these walls, she knows exactly where she needs to go. There is a call that beckons her, echoing within the very fabric of her soul. She doesn't know what it means or where it comes from, but it cries out to her warm and boldly, and she feels almost compelled to answer it. She follows it, walking down the maze of stone and banners as though the path were second nature to her, because she simply has to know. She feels it in every thread of her mind that there is no one but her who can answer that signal, the song so hauntingly familiar, getting closer and closer. And she wakes up. Clara was the second of the 3 Stahlbaum children, but at times she felt like she must belong to a different family entirely. It was the only way of explaining why she didn't feel connected to her brother or her sister. Fritz was a simple boy. All he needed was a toy horse and a stick, and suddenly he was a brave knight leading a glorious army. There was no battle too fierce, no challenge too deadly. In his childish daydreams, his side would always win, no matter what. Clara wasn't interested in the war narratives that compelled him so deeply, but she would still play with him from time to time, usually taking the role of whatever general he was trying to overthrow. She was glad she had someone to run around with, as it reminded her of the more carefree days of her youth, but his games interested her less and less, even as her heart still yearned for mindless fun. Louise was no better. In fact, Clara found her way worse. She was a bright young woman, complimented often for her beauty and even more so for her manners and skills. Her delicate hands found no trouble in brushing melodies out of piano keys, or conjuring charming birds and flowers out of embroidery thread, or gently holding the silky pages of her poetry books, which she read by the afternoon light, her face a pearly portrait of serenity. Clara couldn't bear any of it. The stillness and the patience and the mindfulness, it all just seemed to snuff out whatever joy she still felt within her chest. She couldn't stand the thought that this was what was expected of her, that she would be chiseled down into something so flavorless. The mere idea of it was like an icy hand grabbing her by the throat. When the threat of her future became too overbearing, or the ghost of her lost past was too haunting, Clara knew there was one place where she felt safe no matter what. At the center of the town square lied the workshop of Drosselmeyer, the local toy maker. The family had hired him once or twice to surprise the children during the holidays, and Clara knew she would never forget the experience. Not only were Drosselmeyer's creations on an entirely different level from other workers, but the man himself knew how to make a spectacle. Even the most ordinary of toys could be changed into something amazing thanks to his touch. Clara had started visiting his shop once she'd been deemed old enough to leave the house on her own, and in Drosselmeyer, she had found a friend like she'd never had. While Louise would call her silly whenever Clara tried being sincere, and Fritz was far too young to understand the real troubles of the heart, Drosselmeyer was kind and welcoming, and offered advice that truly spoke to Clara's anguish. As she stood now in his shop, however, she couldn't bring herself to say much. It seemed that whatever troubles afflicted her were too profound to be put into words. Drosselmeyer appeared to understand this, as he often did, and proceeded with his usual share of caution and candor, giving her small tasks so that she could fix something instead of just feeling broken. As some of the ice within her melted, Clara opened up about her dreams. She had mentioned them before, and the old man seemed to show genuine interest, which made Clara feel like someone truly cared, as she often felt in Drosselmeyer's company. She told him about the many twisting halls, and how she almost believed that she was making progress, the call becoming clearer to her mind. The man listened and nodded and raised his eyebrows appropriately and encouraged Clara to keep exploring those dreams, as you never know what they can reveal to you. And on the following night, Clara had the dream once more. She stood alone in the castle, the walls dark and cold, and the beckoning hit her like a storm. She could feel it more than ever as it vibrated through her bones, pulling her closer to its source as though she was being reeled in, her feet rushing through the stone, her heart pounding in her chest, in her hands, in the back of her eager eyes. As she opened the last set of wooden doors, she found it, the center of the call. And she saw it, lying on the floor, waiting for her. And she woke up. She rushes through the town on her way to the toy shop, bursting through the doors as she starts telling her story, talking about how the call felt closer than the other times, and how she entered the main hall and found... She trails off. There, behind the toy maker, like it had always stood on that shelf. Though she knew she was seeing it for the first time, there it was. A Nutcracker doll, the same one she saw in her dream, the one she met in the center of the hall, the thing she'd been beckoned to all of those nights. She doesn't understand it. She picks up the doll, confusedly, staring into its painted eyes. It looks no different from other Nutcracker toy soldiers she's seen around, and there really didn't appear to be anything special about that one. And yet... Drosselmeyer approaches her, understanding as always. He states that she can discover the truth if she wants, but it's a perilous journey and he cannot go with her. She hesitates, every fiber of her being magnetic with excitement, as though she stood at the edge of something great. She nods, not knowing what awaited her, but feeling an unmistakable certainty that she needed to go through with it. The toy maker brings her through an entrance at the end of his shop, and then to a corridor where several ornate wooden doors stand. He opens one of them, leading into a pitch-black unknown. Clara takes a deep breath and steps through. When she wakes up, she stands in a clearing that is as beautiful as it is inexplicable. Everything seems just fantastically appetizing. Pastel colors swirl around in patterns on the trees, the crystallized grass rustles gently beneath her knees, and she wishes she could just straight up take a bite off the clouds. She doesn't notice it at first, but there's someone else there with her. When she turns to him, she recognizes him instantly, although he looks a bit different. It's the Nutcracker doll, the same one from her dreams, but come to life somehow. His skin is still wooden and his eyes are painted on, but he stands as tall as her and he looks just as confused. When she asks him who he is, he says he doesn't know. He can't remember. He has no name and no past and no idea of how he got there. This is frustrating to Clara, who was hoping to get some answers, but part of her also feels glad to have someone else who knows just as much information about this mystery as she does. The Nutcracker says that although he doesn't remember anything about himself, he does know some things about the place where they stand. This, as he explains it, is the land of sweets. And if they want to get help, they should head to the Candy Kingdom, which is ruled by a kind and wise queen who will certainly know what to do. The Nutcracker leads the way, seeming pretty sure of the path for someone with no memories, and Clara wonders if perhaps his job as a soldier was to patrol these areas in the past. She's welcomed into the kingdom and taken to the throne room where the queen stands. And Clara cannot help but think that there is an air of sadness to her figure. The girl explains herself as best as she can, telling the ruler of how she found this place through a door in Drosselmeyer's workshop, and the queen states that she's not surprised, since the toy maker was an old friend of the kingdom. Clara talks about her dreams, and how she feels almost summoned to this place, and how, most of all, she wants to find out everything she can about the Nutcracker and help him retrieve his memories. The queen is understanding, but solemnly declares that she cannot help Clara at the moment, for her kingdom is preparing for a terrible upcoming battle against the mouse army. She tells Clara that when the rats first came upon this land, they tried to take it from the candy people, and they seem to be planning a second attack. She sighs as she comments that the losses of the first battle were insurmountable, and she dreads to think of what the second one could bring. But, she says, as her eyes light up, and she stares at Clara with pleading determination, the girl might be able to help. It was stated by an ancient prophecy that when the kingdom faced its greatest time of need, a traveler from another land would come and bring them to victory. The queen is convinced this figure is Clara and begs her to help. If Clara leads the candy army, once the battle is done, the queen will spare no efforts in helping her with her quest. Clara reluctantly accepts, although she does not look forward to her moment of action. Luckily for her, though, the queen states that there are still a few days left before the battle starts, and Clara is welcome to stay and explore the kingdom as she pleases. Upon learning this, she asks the Nutcracker if he would like to accompany her as she hangs around, and he states that if this is what she wants him to do, then he will. Clara is excited to see the kingdom, but mostly she just wants to get to know the Nutcracker better. She felt almost drawn to him, and she wished that she could explain it away with magic, and say that the same call that brought her to this land now kept her attached to him, but she knew it wasn't true. The wish to get closer to him came entirely from within her heart, in a way that she had never felt for anybody else before. She tries to learn more about him, but the task appears to be harder than she would have guessed. Not only he doesn't remember anything about himself, he seems almost reluctant to entertain the subject. He can talk about his kingdom and all the wonderful sights to see and things to do, and Clara does find great fun in seeing those sights and doing those things with him, but he always takes himself out of the picture, as though he didn't matter. When she pressures him, he states that he is a soldier and that he must follow the orders of his queen, but that's as far as his knowledge goes. Clara figures that, since he doesn't know anything about himself, this is a great opportunity for him to learn what that is, and encourages him to have fun with her. He goes along with her plans, and sometimes, when they're laughing together, he feels to her like he's undoubtedly alive. She asks him about the rats, as she worries about the upcoming fight, and she wants to know what he thinks of them, so he says that everyone in the kingdom knows that they're treacherous parasites who should be disposed of. Clara says that that's what everybody else thinks, and she wants to know what he thinks, and the Nutcracker pauses. He says he's never stopped to consider it before. To be fair, he doesn't know what to think. He knows he's a soldier and that he must fight against the rats, but deep down, none of that means anything to him. Everything he fights for feels empty, and he can't think of anything he truly cares about. These past few days that he spent with Clara have been the closest he's ever felt to finding something that speaks to his heart. When they're out together, Clara notices the stares. Other candy citizens shoot them looks from the side, whispering when they think she's not looking. She's familiar with that sort of thing. It's the same stares that she gets when she goes into town wearing trousers instead of a traditional dress. She's seen Drosselmeyer get those same looks before too. She's learned to ignore them, but it saddens her to think that even in a different land, these gestures are still a reality. Until at some point, she's pulled aside by one of the candy denizens, and she's told the truth behind the Nutcracker. A long time ago, he used to be a prince, the queen's son, and the kingdom knew peace. But then the rats attacked, and the prince joined the battle. That's when he ran into the Rat King, who used his magical scepter to cast a spell on the boy, turning him into a wooden Nutcracker doll. He lost all his memories and became a mindless soldier, and although the kingdom has since recovered from the fight, the kid was never quite the same. And to see him spending time with Clara, laughing again? That was something they'd never thought they'd see. The stairs weren't for her. Clara asks about his curse and how she can break it, and she's told that her Nutcracker will only be a prince again when he learns to think for himself once more, instead of simply following orders. The girl recalls how she'd just been talking to him about finding something worth fighting for, and she feels a spark of hope, but it wasn't bound to last. The queen comes to her and brings her the news that she's been dreading. It's time for the battle against the rats, and Clara must lead the candy army, just like she'd promised. With her Nutcracker, she hatches up a plan. If the Rat King put a curse on him, he might as well lift it. Once the two forces collide, Clara and her friend will sneak up onto the castle and confront the Rat King once and for all, forcing him to undo his spell. Clara had never thought she would be the one leading an army, but she finds it that she doesn't have to do much strategizing. Just the sight of her motivates the candy soldiers to give it their all, and the rat forces seem to be severely outnumbered. As the battle rages on, she puts her plan into action and slips through the main fighting, scurrying her way up to the castle with her Nutcracker. When she gets to the fortress, she's surprised to see that she actually recognizes those halls. They are the same ones that she's run through in her dreams. She knows exactly how to get to the throne room. It was where she first saw the Nutcracker doll, the source of the call that summoned her. The Rat King sits upon his throne, an air of somberness surrounding his dark figure. Clara demands that he release the curse that he has placed upon her Nutcracker and let him become a prince again. But the Rat King sighs in grieving frustration and simply calls her a fool. Clara doubles down on her order, but the Rat King remains inflexible. She feels within herself a boiling, thickening anger, a kind of cruelty she didn't know she had it in her. As the despot continues to ignore her, she loses herself more and more in her own blistering hatred and strikes at the Rat King out of sheer desperation. He defends himself instantly and states that if it's a fight that she wants, then it's a fight that she shall have. He gears himself up, lifting his deadly scepter, and swings it violently upon Clara's direction. Just as the weapon is about to hit her, Clara is pushed to the side by her Nutcracker, who takes the blow in her place. He falls limply to the floor. Clara rushes to his side, tears streaming down her face. As she takes his hand, she realizes that there's something different about him. His skin is tender to the touch, and his face looks vivid and lifelike, although he shows no reaction to her calling him. She turns once more to the rat, begging him to do something, but the king just stares helplessly at the pair. Clara says that there's something wrong, that his curse must have backfired, and that he needs to fix it immediately. He cast the spell, so he must be the one to break it. But the Rat King simply shakes his head and says he didn't cast it. Before Clara can ask the question that burns in the back of her throat, a voice from down the hall says, "I did." And out of the darkness, Drosselmeyer appears. Once upon a time, there was a peaceful kingdom where the rivers were made of hot chocolate and cake never went bad and toys never broke. It was a land of childhood and sweets, of comfort and joy, a place where everyone felt safe. The castle magician, Drosselmeyer, delighted the court members with his tricks and inventions, but his biggest fan was none other than the prince, a young boy with sweetness in his eyes. The queen was beloved by all and ruled the land with a fair and gentle hand, and her son knew that burden would fall upon himself someday, so he wanted to be ready. There was nothing more than he wished for but to be an excellent king, one that would continue to lead his subjects to glorious peace. He was young and bright and full of fire, and his mother couldn't be prouder. But Drosselmeyer, who had been appointed as his mentor and guardian, knew the prince put a lot of pressure on himself. The crown was heavy, and he was eager to wear it, but the magician wondered if that weight was more than the kid was ready to bear. No one could have foreseen the attack of the rat army. The candy citizens scrambled together to put up a defense line, but they weren't used to such things, and the battle was tough. The prince insisted he needed to fight. He didn't want to be seen as a coward, and he couldn't just stand by while his people were massacred. The queen was against the idea, but the boy insisted, and Drosselmeyer saw how much that meant to him, and how he wasn't going to let anyone stop him. He promised the queen to personally keep the boy's safety. After all, if the kid was determined to do it, then he'd better make sure someone had his back. On the battlefield, they came face to face with the Rat King, the leader of the opposing army, and when he geared up for an attack, Drosselmeyer knew he had made a mistake. The prince was going to be hit. The prince was going to die. With no other way to defend him, an instant away from disaster, Drosselmeyer conjured up a spell, a desperate wish for the kid to become an unkillable soldier. When the scepter hit the boy's wooden chest, it barely left a scratch. The rats lost the battle, but ultimately won the war. They conquered a modest piece of the candy territory, which they used to build their own kingdom. Drosselmeyer tried every counterspell, every trick, every spark and hex and wish and charm, but he could not break his own curse. The boy had lost every sense of his previous identity, all life behind his eyes. He didn't laugh, he didn't cry, he didn't speak unless spoken to. He followed orders, but never gave them. He listened, but never contested, only nodding in agreement. He was, indeed, the perfect soldier, undying, but unliving. For failing his mission and costing the kingdom the life of their prince, the queen declared that Drosselmeyer was to be banished from the land until the day he found a way to break the curse and bring the boy back to who he was. As a last favor to the magician, and as a way to serve her own narrative, the queen preserved his memory by twisting the story and stating that the Rat King had cursed her son, and the kingdom believed her. Drosselmeyer searched the whole world, but he couldn't find a way to break the spell. In his journey, he learned more about the type of curse he had so clumsily cast. Turns out, the way to bring the prince back would be to help the boy find a true calling, something that spoke deeply to his heart and gave him something worth fighting for. But being that catalyst was impossible for Drosselmeyer, who had exhausted every angle, and no one else seemed up for the task. With nowhere to go, he found an unlikely ally in the source of his misery, and was welcomed into the Rat Kingdom. The Rat King and Drosselmeyer grew close, sharing their grief over being fiercely rejected. The ruler told the magician about the world his kind came from, a place with no spells or curses, but a magic of its own, with a people that was capable of great tenacity and kindness, but also of boundless cruelty. These people had branded ratkind as a pest, as something that must be violently eliminated. And so they found their way into the Candy Kingdom, fleeing from death and trying to carve out a space where they could be safe. If their world had brought the magician no answers, then maybe the solution lied in this other land, with all of its mysteries and surprises. The Rat King taught Drosselmeyer how to travel there, and so the magician became a toy maker. Every night he sent out his spells, a whisper into the night. He called upon someone who could answer the plight of the Nutcracker, to reach upon his heart and turn him back into a prince. For over 100 years he tried, but no one answered. Until one day, Clara chased the voice in her dreams. The girl shakes her head. None of it makes sense. Drosselmeyer couldn't possibly be that old, and she had never heard the call before that first night a few weeks ago. But Drosselmeyer explains that time works differently for the candy people and that humans age much faster. And if she didn't hear the call before, it was because she wasn't ready to hear it. Turns out, the Nutcracker did find something worth fighting for. Clara. By choosing to defend her, he had given his life to something fully out of his own volition, without an order behind it. And in doing so, he broke the spell. But the blast from the Rat King's scepter interrupted that process, and now he was stuck in between states. Not fully alive and not fully dead. Not fully a prince and not fully a Nutcracker. Clara feels a fire raging from within. If Drosselmeyer's spells won't help, then she is going to cast some magic of her own. The battle stops as she walks down the path to the castle, carrying her dear friend upon her arms. Rats and toys and candies alike follow her as a procession. The air is electric and deadly quiet. She places her friend upon the throne room and ceremoniously surrounds him with symbols of all the things they'd done together, all the time they had spent in each other's company. She holds his hand and calls to him, her voice barely louder than a whisper. Softly, she states that she loves him and that she will never leave his side, that she will fight for him just as he had fought for her. The boy awakens. Not a Nutcracker, not a prince. A human. The kingdoms rejoice. The peace that once had been lost returns to the land. There is no more animosity between the rats and the others. Drosselmeyer visits often, but he spends most of his time down at his shop, where Clara and her friend work together. The boy couldn't return to his kingdom, and he could never truly rule it. Every time he stops by, he looks a little bit older, and the queen tries not to think of how she will vastly outlive her son. She's just grateful for every extra moment she gets to see him smile. Drosselmeyer was worried about the boy at first. He had spent so much of his life trying to be a good prince, and another great chunk trying to be a Nutcracker soldier, and the magician wondered what would become of him now that he couldn't be either of those things anymore. But that's okay. The boy found out he could be anything he wanted. A human, a kid, an apprentice toy maker, a friend. Clara and him are inseparable, and if they have it their way, for as long as they're alive, they will never be apart. Hello! I hope you've enjoyed my Nutcracker adaptation. I mean, of course you did. It's the best Nutcracker adaptation you've ever seen, after all. I had a lot of fun making it, and I wanted to take this opportunity to go into the themes and influences behind this piece, exploring a bit of its background and the motivations behind it. The first thing of note is that I created this adaptation because it was fun. Over the course of my Nutcracker December project, I have come to fall in love with this story and the many different ways it can be retold. I wanted to join in and create something that was quintessentially mine, but that would still fit within the larger mythos of the Nutcracker. I was inspired not only by the original short story and the ballet, but also by some of the very adaptations that I've reviewed over the course of the month. The idea of having Clara as very deliberately stuck between childhood and adulthood came from The Nutcracker Prince from 1990, because I love the way they explored that notion with the character, and also from the Hard Nut Ballet with how the journey in the story is very coming of age. I love the idea of the character having to grow up to discover that the love had always been there, and I wanted to explore that and how Clara forges her own identity in my version. It's not the candies or the magic or the battles that make her mature, it's her own self-affirmation. It's her giving herself permission to take control of the story. The idea that the Nutcracker lost his memories because of a spell is a bit influenced by the magic flute, though in my version it's more of a consequence of becoming a mindless tool instead of it being part of a nefarious plan. And this is going to sound kinda silly, but the Nutcracker in the Four Realms was also important to me because it showed me that the Nutcracker character could look however I wanted. I grew up with the Barbie version, so I had a very rigid idea of how the character should be, but in the Four Realms, he's something else entirely. For starters, he's not white, and this is like the only adaptation that does this. After I watched the movie, I felt almost silly in how I had never considered it, but it comes from how I'd just never been shown anything like that before, so I was trapped by these made-up rules I learned from a VHS when I was 6 years old. Although I think the Four Realms movie itself is kinda mid, it was important to show me that, actually, I could do whatever I wanted with the characters. So, I did just that. And I had so much fun. So now, I want to tell you a little bit more about what I was trying to achieve with the story, whether I'm just confirming something you already understood or explaining something that hadn't come across before. The first thing is, Clara is supposed to be non-binary. She is unhappy with the societal expectations related to womanhood, and she feels suffocated by the thought that she must grow up to be like her sister, but the other side of the spectrum also doesn't satisfy her, because she also doesn't want to be like her brother. She's something else entirely. Of course, in my story, the concepts of womanhood and manhood are boiled down to very basic ideas, like girls do embroidery and read poetry and boys go to war and become soldiers. This doesn't even come close to encompassing the true depth of those concepts in real life, and both men and women can incorporate many different factors to how they perceive and define their own genders, etc. But for the purpose of my story, this essentialism shows how limiting those concepts are to Clara, who doesn't fit into either mold. I feel like many times, a story with like an old-timey setting will critique the traditional definition of womanhood because it's too limiting, and the solution ends up being like shifting to a more masculine side of the spectrum. But in this story, I wanted to make it clear that Clara's solution isn't becoming a man, it's becoming herself, in her own way of defining what that is. I didn't want the message to be too obvious or ham-fisted, but I still wanted to leave enough clues in the narrative and illustrations that could lead to this interpretation if you were paying attention. Later in this video, I'll go over the drawings I made and point out some design choices that will help this idea. And if you didn't catch on any of that, or if you came out of the story with a completely different interpretation, that's fine too. I'm just giving you the opportunity to learn more about it. Clara is a character who is always stuck in between. She's not an adult, but no longer a child. She's not a man, but not a woman either. Either extreme feels too limiting and does not fully represent who she is. With the Nutcracker, it's a similar story. At first, he is a prince, but that takes a toll on him. He's too concerned with being a good ruler to the point of sacrificing himself for his kingdom and losing himself to the battle. When he becomes a Nutcracker, he also loses his identity and becomes fully empty. The solution lies outside of those two extremes, as he only finds true happiness once he becomes a human. I ended up looking at the concept of a Nutcracker as being a tool. It is something that you use to crack nuts, and aside from that, it doesn't seem to have any function. I wanted to play around with the idea of what would happen if someone saw themselves entirely as a tool for someone else's purpose, and how empty that would leave you. When the prince becomes a Nutcracker, he doesn't see himself as having much of an identity anymore. By the way, I'm referring to him as just the Nutcracker because I can't decide on a good enough name for him. I grew up with the Barbie adaptation, so to me the character will always be an Eric, but I don't want to call my Nutcracker an Eric because he's just so different from the Barbie one. So please leave name suggestions in the comments. I'm gesturing to the comments with my fingers, you can't see my fingers. One thing I wish I could have explored more in my adaptation is the period of the story in which Clara and the Nutcracker get to spend time together. I didn't go into many details of how their outings were or the nitty-gritty of their dialogues, but I feel like a longer storytelling format like a movie or a book would really do it justice. The story starts with two characters who don't know who they are. Clara doesn't fit into either end of the spectrum, and the Nutcracker is stuck in an extreme. It is through their shared bond that they learn who they are. In a way, they craft their identities together, and although by the end they are fully self-assured individuals, one is not complete without the other. This is another thing I wanted to talk about here. The relationship between Clara and the Nutcracker is deep, significant, intense, and also fully platonic. This is a story about the power of love, and that love comes from friendship. The standard is to make Clara and the Nutcracker into a romantic couple, so 99% of the adaptations go for that route, and I wanted to explore a relationship that could be just as significant for the two, but that was based on friendship instead. I feel like not only that would be a different angle to play around with, but also I'm all for deep friendships in media, as this sort of bond should never be seen as lesser than a romantic one. If you are really starved for romance though, there's my wildcard pairing of Drosselmeyer and the Rat King. I feel like the figure of Drosselmeyer was often underutilized in these adaptations. He usually knows what's going on, and he's sometimes allowed to help Clara out, but we're never really given many answers about him or why he's involved in all this. I wanted to expand on that idea. Drosselmeyer is such a fun and mysterious figure, and I wanted to give him more to do. And also make him gay, because this is my adaptation and I get to do whatever I want. As for the rats, they are seen as the villains in the original Nutcracker, but I wanted to do something different here. I know it's a bit of a cliche nowadays to try to redeem well-established evil figures, but I didn't want the rats to be evil. They were forced into a role of villainy because they were kicked out of our world and had to carve out a place for themselves in the candy world, or the land of sweets I think I called it, which could have been a peaceful ordeal if they had been welcomed, but they were not, so they were forced to act out. There is a sort of hidden violence in the figure of the Candy Queen, because the first war with the rats could have been avoided if she had been more understanding of their plight. And even though she claimed that the second war was going to be initiated by the rats, it was actually her that was planning on attacking him. She was so afraid of being ambushed by the rats that she initiated the second cycle of brutality. It's not super obvious or explored in the story as it was told, but it's something I would like to dive deeper into if I had the space. And now, as much as I love my own adaptation, and as much as it is the best adaptation of the Nutcracker you will ever see, there are still some shortcomings in the story that I would like to address. The first one is the whole thing with there being a prophecy stating that Clara would be some sort of savior. I feel like that went a bit under-explained in the narrative. My original idea was that Drosselmeyer was a castle wizard and he dealt with all things related to magic, and that included divination. He either came up with the prophecies themselves or he found them and investigated them further, then relaying them to the Candy Queen. So even though she banished Drosselmeyer later on, she still held on to his prophecies because he was a great friend to her. There's also how the magical candy people live way longer than the humans because they're from different worlds. But the rats also came from the human world, and they don't seem to die as fast, because the Rat King was there for the first war, and he's still kicking around for the second one. Yup, that's a plot hole. Insert CinemaSins ding noise here. But this is my story, so I can do whatever I want, and to that I say, the rats are magical and they live long. That's just the thing about rats. That's just the thing that's true in my story. They live just as long as the candy people, which is way longer than humans. Why? Because I said so. There, problem solved. In any ideal world, this story would be an animated movie. I'm thinking 2D, but I would also settle for 3D or even stop motion. If any producers or studio heads are watching this, you can reach out to me through my business email linked on my channel. I'm kidding, of course. Unless... Okay, now I'm gonna talk about my illustrations for a bit. Take it away, real life hands me. Hello everyone, I wanted to tell you a little bit more about the drawings that I have created. I didn't really write a script for this, so I'm just going to speak whatever comes to my mind, and there are some really cool details that I wanted to point out in these illustrations. So as you can see, I have not drawn the cover yet. I'm going to do it later on. So let's get right into it. Here we have Clara, and I struggled quite a bit with Clara's design. I think I went back and forth like 1,000 times. And I landed on this one, and I am really fond of it. I really like her eyes. They look really sharp and alive and attentive. I love her thick eyebrows and her hair, whatever is going on with it, I really like. I wanted to give her like a bit of like a wolf cut look, like unkempt hair, and I think that it turned out really nice. At the start of the illustrations, I drew like these lines within her hair, which I stopped doing later. And this is her in her dream sequences, and here she is wearing just the nightgown that she wears to sleep in the real world. And as you can see, we have an open neckline here. This is going to be important later. Here we have her running through the halls. I really didn't know what I was doing with these symbols, and like I stopped doing stuff like that later on. But the mouse slash rat symbol is quite significant, and it stays for the rest of the book. And it's like, why are there rat banners in her dream world? Suspicious. And then she wakes up. And here we have her family shot. I wanted Clara to have a little bit of like both of her siblings in her design. So she has long hair just like her sister, and she has the scraggly wolf cut just like her brother. Her eyebrows are thick like her sister. My cat's eating plastic right now. I'll be right back. Anyway, as I was saying, a relevant design thing is that her sister has like a lot of bows to her design, which are also incorporated in Clara's like real world outfit. So here we have her brother, and again, like, I am not saying that masculinity can be reduced to war, but as a symbol for my narrative, this is what I went with. So he is very like battle centric. This little man here, he's supposed to be holding a gun. It kind of looks like he's playing the guitar, but we'll just be okay with that. And her brother wears shorts, which will be relevant later also. And here we have her sister. And again, womanhood does not have to be like reduced to quote-unquote girly things, but also that's the symbols that I went with. And we really went ham on the bow designs. And here, notice how the bows, they look beautiful and like full and plump, but then when Clara wears them, it's like frumpy and falling down, and it's like a strong mark upon her neck, like it's suffocating her. So to her sister, they feel beautiful and freeing and adequate, let's say. She likes them, but for Clara, it doesn't work, showing that Clara is not happy with the womanhood role that she is pushed into, being like born as a woman in the real world. Here we have Drosselmeyer's workshop. I think this is the drawing that I spent the most time on, just because I knew that it would cover like a lot of paragraphs in the narration, so I wanted to give you plenty to look at, and also I wanted to convey the impressiveness of Drosselmeyer's work. And I snuck a few like Easter eggs here and there, like we've got my boys hanging out in the corner, and here you can see a little plushie of the Rat King. And also, if you know what you're looking for, you can kind of see the Nutcracker doll peeking behind Drosselmeyer. So I thought that was pretty cool. I think my favorite figurine out of the ones that I drew was this little juggling teddy bear. I don't know why, he just looks really cute. Here we have Clara, and again, the bow. I think I'm gonna add the rest of the bow here. You're getting the early cut of this book. You can see the like suffocating element of the bow as a strong element tied around her neck. And here she has her nightgown with the open neckline, meaning that in her dreams she does not feel suffocated. She feels like she is doing what she is meant to do, which is in this case following the call. As you can see, she is quite determined while doing it, and we have the banners again, and she sees something. Oh no, what is she seeing? How mysterious. And then she rushes into the shop. I gave Drosselmeyer his usual like cape and eye patch just because I love those design elements. They appear in a lot of adaptations, and they make him look really cool, so I kept those in my adaptation as well. And it is funny how I drew him wearing the cape like at all times. He wears that cape indoors, outdoors, whatever he's doing, he's got that cape on. And here I wanted the focus to be on the Nutcracker doll. Again, if you know what you were looking for, and I was not going to draw 1,000 little figurines again, so I went with these simple shapes for the background, and I think it ended up looking really cool. And here we have my boy, the Nutcracker doll, and Clara picks him up, and I actually really like the design of the doll. Again, it's not a very functional Nutcracker like a lot of these Nutcracker designs tend to be in the adaptations. You don't see you fitting a lot of nuts into his teeny tiny, but he looks really cute in my humble opinion. So they talk about the situation. Here we have the doors, and like you can see the portal to the Candy Kingdom, and it's like Drosselmeyer knows how to get there, but wait, what's this door doing here with the little rat symbol? What is he doing going to the Rat Kingdom? And it makes sense later on. I don't like how close together the doors are. Kind of messed up there, but whatever, we'll just roll with it. And the other doors don't really represent anything. This one is kind of inspired in like the snowflake scene, which does come back in these illustrations later. And the other doors are just miscellaneous. I really like this illustration. I think it looks so beautiful and atmospheric. And here we have the Nutcracker. I think he looks so cute in his living Nutcracker form because of his like painted eyes. I'm not really good at designing castles, as you can probably see. So yeah, a better illustrator would have made this castle look really cool and inspired and candy looking, but I'm not that person. It's just like a basic candy castle. What you gonna do? Here we have the Candy Queen, and I thought I was so clever for doing this shape with the candy cane so that it looks like a little heart. And she looks really nice, you know, her hair is supposed to evoke a feeling of like cotton candy. That was a bit of my inspiration there. And you know, she is the queen of the land of sweets, but also she sits in like this pointed, sharp throne, which I was hoping to evoke a feeling of like there's a hidden sort of violence behind her, like a strength that you don't really see at first glance. And again, with the hard candy canes, I don't know, I just thought that looked really cool. And Clara is still wearing her real world outfit there, but as you will see, she changes into her Candy Kingdom outfit. Wow, we've got an official outfit change. And here you have the open neckline showing that Clara is much more comfortable with the role that she's playing now, that being getting to know the Candy Kingdom and most importantly befriending her Nutcracker. And in her candy outfit, I tried to incorporate outfits of her siblings' design. So she has the more open sort of droopy neckline and bust silhouette that her sister has, and she has the shorts that her brother wears. So in her outfit, even though Clara is not happy with what masculinity represents or what femininity represents, it doesn't mean that she rejects these concepts altogether. With this outfit, I wanted to evoke the idea that like you can take the very gendered stuff that you usually wouldn't like, but you can like pick and choose the stuff that works for you and incorporate it into your reality. So that's what I was trying to do with this kind of hybrid candy look. Again, we have the boys, my beautiful children, hanging out. The Candy Kingdom is very like, don't think too hard about it, like the people, they are made of candy and also they eat candy. So I drew like a cupcake inspired guy eating a cupcake, so it's like it's a fun candy time. You just don't think about it too hard. And I designed this guy with like jelly bean hair. That was the inspiration for his design, and I really liked him, so I do bring him back later on. We still have them hanging out. You can see that the Nutcracker is becoming more and more comfortable with it. He's like opening up more, and he's very moody now thinking about the rats. Oh no, what does he think of them? This outfit, I tried to do something inspired, like a berry tart, so you would have kind of like the crust here on the neckline, this for jelly, you have the little fruits up here. This guy is supposed to be like citrus inspired, but I don't show a lot of their dress, so it doesn't really translate. The candy designs here, they work sort of like Wreck-It Ralph, you know, where people wear candy-inspired outfits. I didn't draw them as being like, you know, like gingerbread people or stuff like that. They are regular-looking humans, but they are inspired by candy. Here's the jelly bean guy again. I really liked him, so I thought he would be the perfect person to deliver the sad backstory to Clara. Next outfit change. This is Clara's war outfit, and it is very inspired by the outfit that her brother wears. So we have this, I don't know what to call that. Sorry, the word is evading me, but this thing. And the shirt, which here, the collar of the shirt in her brother sits rather low on the neck, but in Clara's version it also goes all the way up her neck, like it's also suffocating her, because again, she is not comfortable being put into this war role, this very masculine within the universe of this adaptation role. Here you can see the neckline a little better, so it goes all the way up her neck, and it is very suffocating to her. We got the castles again, so now you understand why the banners in her dream also had little rat symbols. And here we have the Rat King. This whole sequence of illustrations was a little challenging just because I had to paint all of this with pencil, and that takes quite a long time, but I do like the dark atmosphere that it creates. And Clara gears up for an attack again. I spent forever painting this background. A little bit of perspective here. Ooh, I'm getting fancy with it. I'm not like the best at perspective, but I was having a lot of fun designing these different scenes. So you have a very strong image of the rat swinging his scepter. Again, it took me a billion years to paint this page, but I think it looks really cool. And I started messing around this section with like leaving Clara's hair not painted on, even though she has dark hair, just for like the mood of the scene, and I think it also works really well in this one. Again, I'm not the best at perspective, but I was trying out some new stuff. Like, you know, I'm never gonna be good if I don't practice it and if I don't have fun with it. So that's what I was trying to do here. And she turns very dramatically just to see Drosselmeyer walk in. And I kind of like this effect that he ended up having. It's like he has a spotlight of darkness. Like he is surrounded by just shattering darkness. I thought that looked pretty cool. Here we have a younger version of Drosselmeyer. We'll notice that he does not have his eye patch, but he does in fact have his cape. And here you have the young Nutcracker prince. His design really came together when I had the idea to give him candies for eyes. I also gave the same characteristic to his mom, and I think this looks really cool. He has the same candy canes as his mom, but he wears his in the shape of an X instead of a heart. And he is also supposed to have like the same cotton candy hair, which is why I didn't color it in. It's supposed to be like fluffy and airy and pastel. And the rats attack! Oh no! You can see the menacing shadow of the Rat King in the background, and the prince asks to fight. Oh no, the rat's going to attack. I had a more ambitious vision for this page. I feel like I wanted to see more of Drosselmeyer instead of just his hand, but I have limited space with this page size. It's very hard to draw teeny tiny things here, so this was the best way that I found to make things fit. This page is actually the second version of this page. I drew an entire page for this and I didn't really like it, so I went back, I erased it to make it lighter, and then I glued this page on top so that I would have an illustration that I was happier with. I am really glad that I was able to go back and fix this page, and I have a version now that I'm much happier with. The battle scene, you can see that the battle was really tough because they cracked one candy thing. I didn't want to draw a bunch of corpses. I thought that would be really morbid. So that just symbolizes the horrors of war. And here we have a good look at our now Nutcracker Nutcracker prince. Drosselmeyer travels through the realms, and you have like the Candy Kingdom and the Snow Kingdom with like the snowflakes tying back to that door. I didn't really know what to put in this corner of the page, so I made up a Crystal Kingdom for this Nutcracker adaptation. Maybe we would see more of it in the movie version. Wouldn't that be nice? So he arrives at the Rat Kingdom, and here they grow very close. I think I skipped a page. Where's the... Aha! Here. When the queen sends him away, and here I show him with an injured eye. So it's like, yeah, he lost an eye, as if that wasn't obvious enough already because of the eye patch. Anyway, sorry about that. They grow close and they walk around the rose gardens of the castle. Again, I'm not good at designing castles, but I think this one turned out pretty nice with the silhouette against the sky. Drosselmeyer travels to the real world and he has to leave his beautiful Rat King behind. Here I wanted to draw him as like standing in the rooftop of a house. I don't know how well that translated in this drawing style, but his cape looks pretty cool in my opinion. Clara finishes hearing all of the story. She's quite shocked. Again, I took a really long time to paint this page. You can see like the in-between state that the Nutcracker prince is at. So he still has his Nutcracker outfit and his Nutcracker blush. You will notice that when he's a Nutcracker, he has these like dashes for blush and dot eyebrows. These eyebrows are a little in between, like a regular eyebrow and just a dot eyebrow, but he has his human nose. And his skin tone doesn't change, but his hair is somewhere in between, like his darker hair and his candy cotton hair. So that's his like in-between limbo state. Clara gets determined to fix the situation and she gets another outfit change, though this is just her adapting her war outfit to suit her better. So she undoes the collar and then she frees her neck, which means she is no longer feeling suffocated by the circumstances. She's taking matters into her own hands. And she ties her jacket around her waist. Everybody watches as she carries her friend back to the castle. Here, because of the nature of these illustrations, I kind of had to speed through the part where she becomes friends with the Nutcracker, like when they get to know each other better. So I didn't show them doing a lot of things. So as I had to draw this page, I just ended up filling it with general nice things that would represent people hanging out. And I put some little Easter eggs, like I was watching a video about Neopets, so I drew a little Neg here in the corner, and this is one of my old Neopets that I had as a kid. I love this page. It looks so soft and tender, just like their friendship. And then he wakes up and he's a human now, so he has the same eyes that he had as a prince, but now he has normal eyes and not candy eyes. His eyebrows are more human-like. He has his prince nose. He has his fully dark hair now. The kingdoms rejoice. And when I first envisioned this page, I was not going to draw the kiss. I was just going to leave the relationship between the Rat King and Drosselmeyer implied, and I would talk about it in these behind-the-scenes bits that I'm doing. But I decided that why not? This is my adaptation. I get to do whatever I want. So yes, they kiss at the end. I like the contrast between the two of them celebrating their relationship with a fully intense and platonic hug versus the romantic kiss of the two in the background. It's a story about the power of friendship, okay? Like, they're friends, and that's fantastic. Everything goes back to normal. Oh, I feel like I skipped a page too because there was this design that I had to mention before. Here we have the Candy Kingdom. I tried to incorporate more the idea of like toys living in this kingdom aside from candy people. So you have a little clown doll and you have a little teddy bear. This girl here has hair inspired in like strawberry, what's the name? Twizzlers? That twisty rope candy kind of thing. And I really liked it, so I bring it back later on for another page. The Twizzler hair
girl comes back with her teddy bear friend, and now they have a rat friend to walk along with them, and you have some rats in the background and stuff. A nice family reunion with the rest of the gang having tea in the background. They're all friends now. They all get to hang out together. Back to the workshop. Again, I was not going to draw 1,000 different miniatures in the background, so you have the same simple shapes deal that I created a few pages ago. And I also think it works, even because the focus should be on the two of them. And they're friends, and they're the best of friends. And Clara gets to wear an outfit with an open neckline, showing that she doesn't feel suffocated by her life anymore. She has taken control of it, and she is doing what she wants to do, thus completing her true journey. And they are holding hands because they're the best of friends. And the end. This was so much fun. I drew all of these in like the span of a week, which is insane. There are like almost 80 illustrations in here. It's like 76 or something. And I could only spend that much time drawing because I was recovering from surgery on my left arm, but I am right-handed, so I could draw these with no issues. And I had a lot of time to spend on these, and I used that time to complete this illustrated book. And I feel like I've never drawn that much or that fast in my entire life, but I really like the end result. I am so happy that I was able to bring this story to life in such a way. The Nutcracker as a story makes me so happy, and I love it so much, and I've grown to love it even more throughout this month after watching all of these adaptations. And I really want you to make this story into your own too. So get silly with it, have fun, take these characters and make them do whatever you want. It's a fun story and such a fun world and concepts, and there's so much that can be done with it. Maybe one day we will all get to watch this in the movies. Wouldn't that be neat?
And this has been the best Nutcracker adaptation you will ever see. This video is a love letter to the story, and also an invitation for you to have fun and create your own adaptations as well. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you on my next video. Bye!